Chapter 2. Under the Stars. It was a wonderful night up on deck, filled with all the majesty and beauty of starlight and a tropic calm. The Pacific slept, a vast, vague swell flowing from far away down south under the night, lifted the Northumberland on its undulations to the rattling sound of the reef points and the occasional creak of the rudder, whilst overhead, near the fiery arch of the Milky Way, hung the Southern Cross like a broken kite. Stars in the sky, stars in the sea, stars by the million and the million, so many lamps ablaze that the firmament filled the mind with the idea of a vast and populous city, yet from all that living and flashing splendor, not a sound. Down in the cabin, or saloon, as it was called by courtesy, were seated the 3 passengers of the ship, 1 reading at the table, 2 playing on the floor. The man at the table, Arthur Lestrange, was seated with his large, deep-sunken eyes fixed on a book. He was most evidently in consumption, very near indeed to reaping the result of that last and most desperate remedy, a long sea voyage. Emmeline Lestrange, his little niece, 8 years of age, a mysterious mite, small for her age, with thoughts of her own, wide-pupilled eyes that seemed the doors for visions, and a face that seemed just to have peeped into this world for a moment, ere it was as suddenly withdrawn, sat in a corner nursing something in her arms, and rocking herself to the tune of her own thoughts. Dick, Lestrange's little son, 8 and a bit, was somewhere under the table. They were Bostonians, bound for San Francisco, or rather for the sun and splendor of Los Angeles, where Lestrange had bought a small estate, hoping there to enjoy the life whose lease would be renewed by the long sea voyage. As he sat reading, the cabin door opened, and appeared an angular female form. This was Mrs. Stannard, the stewardess, and Mrs. Stannard meant bedtime. "Dickie," said Mr. Lestrange, closing his book and raising the tablecloth a few inches. "Bedtime." "Oh, not yet, Daddy," came a sleep-freighted voice from under the table. "I ain't ready. I don't want to go to bed. Hi, yow!" Mrs. Stannard, who knew her work, had stooped under the table, seized him by the foot, and hauled him out kicking and fighting and blubbering all at the same time. As for Emmeline, she, having glanced up and recognized the inevitable, rose to her feet, and, holding the hideous rag doll she had been nursing, head down and dangling in one hand, she stood waiting till Dickie, after a few last perfunctory bellows, suddenly dried his eyes and held up a tear-wet face for his father to kiss. Then she presented her brow solemnly to her uncle, received a kiss and vanished, led by the hand into a cabin on the port side of the saloon. Mr. Lestrange returned to his book, but he had not read for long when the cabin door was opened, and Emmeline, in her nightdress, reappeared, holding a brown paper parcel in her hand, a parcel of about the same size as the book you are reading. "My box," said she, and as she spoke, holding it up as if to prove its safety, the little plain face altered to the face of an angel. She had smiled. When Emmeline Lestrange smiled, it was absolutely as if the light of paradise had suddenly flashed upon her face. The happiest form of childish beauty suddenly appeared before your eyes, dazzled them, and was gone. Then she vanished with her box, and Mr. Lestrange resumed his book. This box of Emmeline's, I may say in parenthesis, had given more trouble aboard ship than all of the rest of the passengers' luggage put together. It had been presented to her on her departure from Boston by a lady friend, and what it contained was a dark secret to all on board, save its owner and her uncle. She was a woman, or at all events, the beginning of a woman, yet she kept this secret to herself, a fact which you will please note. The trouble of the thing was that it was frequently being lost. Suspecting herself, maybe, as an unpractical dreamer in a world filled with robbers, she would cart it about with her for safety, sit down behind a coil of rope, and fall into a fit of abstraction, be recalled to life by the evolutions of the crew reefing or furling or what-not, rise to superintend the operations, and then suddenly find she had lost her box. Then she would absolutely haunt the ship. Wide-eyed and distressed of face, she would wander hither and thither, peeping into the galley, peeping down the forescuttle, never uttering a word or wail, searching like an uneasy ghost, but dumb. She seemed ashamed to tell of her loss, ashamed to let anyone know of it, but everyone knew of it directly they saw her. To use Mr. Button's expression, on the wander, and everyone hunted for it. Strangely enough, it was Paddy Button who usually found it. He who was always doing the wrong thing in the eyes of men, generally did the right thing in the eyes of children. Children, in fact, when they could get at Mr. Button, went for him con amore. He was as attractive to them as a Punch and Judy show or a German band, almost. Mr. Lestrange, after a while, closed the book he was reading, looked around him, and sighed. The cabin of the Northumberland was a cheerful enough place, pierced by the polished shaft of the mizzenmast, carpeted with an Axminster carpet, and garnished with mirrors let into the white pine paneling. Lestrange was staring at the reflection of his own face in one of these mirrors, fixed just opposite to where he sat. His emaciation was terrible, and it was just perhaps at this moment that he first recognized the fact that he must not only die, but die soon. He turned from the mirror and sat for a while with his chin resting upon his hand, and his eyes fixed on an ink spot upon the tablecloth. Then he arose, and crossing the cabin, climbed laboriously up the companionway to the deck. As he leaned against the bulwark rail to recover his breath, the splendor and beauty of the southern night struck him to the heart with a cruel pang. He took his seat on a deck chair and gazed up at the Milky Way, that great triumphal arch built of suns that the dawn would sweep away like a dream. In the Milky Way, near the Southern Cross, occurs a terrible circular abyss, the coal sack. So sharply defined is it, so suggestive of a void and bottomless cavern, that the contemplation of it afflicts the imaginative mind with vertigo. To the naked eye, it is as black and as dismal as death, but the smallest telescope reveals it beautiful and populous with stars. Lestrange's eyes traveled from this mystery to the burning cross, and the nameless and numberless stars reaching to the sea line, where they paled and vanished in the light of the rising moon. Then he became aware of a figure promenading the quarterdeck. It was the old man. A sea captain is always the old man, be his age what it may. Captain Lafarge's age might have been 45. He was a sailor of the Jean Bart type, of French descent, but a naturalized American. "I don't know where the wind's gone," said the captain as he drew near the man in the deck chair. "I guess it's blown a hole in the firmament and escaped somewheres to the back of beyond." "It's been a long voyage," said Lestrange, "and I'm thinking, Captain, it will be a very long voyage for me. My port's not Frisco. I feel it." "Don't you be thinking that sort of thing," said the other, taking his seat in a chair close by. "There's no manner of use forecasting the weather a month ahead. Now we're in warm latitudes, your glass will rise steady, and you'll be as right and spry as any one of us, before we fetch the Golden Gates." "I'm thinking about the children," said Lestrange, seeming not to hear the captain's words. "Should anything happen to me before we reach port, I should like you to do something for me. It's only this: dispose of my body without the children knowing. It has been in my mind to ask you this for some days. Captain, those children know nothing of death." Lafarge moved uneasily in his chair. "Little Emmeline's mother died when she was 2. Her father, my brother, died before she was born. Dickie never knew a mother. She died giving him birth. My God, Captain, death has laid a heavy hand on my family. Can you wonder that I have hid his very name from those 2 creatures that I love?" Aye, said Lafarge. "It's sad, it's sad." "When I was quite a child," went on Lestrange, "a child no older than Dickie, my nurse used to terrify me with tales about dead people. I was told I'd go to hell when I died if I wasn't a good child. I cannot tell you how much that has poisoned my life. For the thoughts we think in childhood, Captain, are the fathers of the thoughts we think when we are grown up. And can a diseased father have healthy children? I guess not. So I just said, when these 2 tiny creatures came into my care, that I would do all in my power to protect them from the terrors of life, or rather, I should say, from the terror of death. I don't know whether I have done right, but I have done it for the best. They had a cat, and one day Dickie came in to me and said, "Father, Pussy's in the garden asleep, and I can't wake her." So I just took him out for a walk. There was a circus in the town, and I took him to it. It so filled his mind that he quite forgot the cat. Next day he asked for her. I did not tell him she was buried in the garden. I just said she must have run away. In a week he had forgotten all about her. Children soon forget. "Aye, that's true," said the sea captain. "But 'pears to me they must learn some time they've got to die. Should I pay the penalty before we reach land, and be cast into that great vast sea, I would not wish the children's dreams to be haunted by the thought. Just tell them I've gone on board another ship. You will take them back to Boston. I have here, in a letter, the name of a lady who will care for them. Dickie will be well off, as far as worldly goods are concerned, and so will Emmeline. Just tell them, I've gone on board another ship. Children soon forget." "I'll do what you ask," said the seaman. The moon was over the horizon now, and the Northumberland lay adrift in a river of silver. Every spar was distinct, every reef point on the great sails, and the decks lay like spaces of frost cut by shadows black as ebony. As the two men sat without speaking, thinking their own thoughts, a little white figure emerged from the saloon hatch. It was Emmeline. She was a professed sleepwalker, a past mistress of the art. Scarcely had she stepped into dreamland than she had lost her precious box, and now she was hunting for it on the decks of the Northumberland. Mr. Lestrange put his finger to his lips, took off his shoes, and silently followed her. She searched behind a coil of rope. She tried to open the galley door. Hither and thither she wandered, wide-eyed and troubled of face, till at last, in the shadow of the hen-coop, she found her visionary treasure. Then back she came, holding up her little night-dress with one hand so as not to trip, and vanished down the saloon companion very hurriedly, as if anxious to get back to bed, her uncle close behind, with one hand outstretched so as to catch her in case she stumbled.